Social media threats. That is the topic today.
Ready or not, here they come. Be sure to visit schoolstatus.com, peachjar.com, nickelstrategies.com, and s'more.com. Advocating for public education, sharing our stories and celebrating our schools, students, and staff. From crisis communications to media relations, social media, and everything in between, we're here to give you the best strategies, tools, and techniques to help you help your community. Welcome to the School PR Podcast, brought to you by Peach Jar, School Status, Nickel Strategies, and s'more. Love 'em or leave 'em. Here's your hosts, Matthew Jennings and Ryan Ferran.
All right. Hopefully you love us and you don't leave us, but you're here, so thanks for at least putting up with us. It is Ryan Ferran and the man, the myth, the legend, Matthew Jennings. Matthew, what's up, sir?
Yo, living the dream, getting it done, just trying to keep my head down and stay out of this social media threat stuff. This is intense stuff.
Yeah, it's past few years, it's been bad, and this
Yep.
past few weeks has been even worse as there's it seems like almost a coordinated hoax kind of going through definitely California, maybe even nationally with these kind of Snapchat things and a list of schools. So I know the listserv was blowing up last week. And so we thought we would chat about strategies and what people can do. We've dealt with them here. I mean, most people listening, you've dealt with them. Everyone's dealt with them at some level. Becomes exhausting, but a lot of new people in our field and even veterans, some of the questions are great questions because when do you communicate? Who do you communicate with? If it happened just at this school, do you tell everyone? When
if it happened at a neighboring district,
exactly,
you're out of state.
Mm-hmm. And so that's when it becomes difficult, and people are kind of searching for answers, best practices, and there's, I don't know that there is a solid gold answer to each one of these, because I do feel like there's a lot of gray area with the threat and that sort of thing. Obviously, first and foremost, you got to work with law enforcement. We're not investigative agencies to that level of criminal activity and threat. So, that's why you want to have those good relationships, know who to call, when to call, and don't, if you just started a school district, you have a district, you have 5 different cities, you got to get those lists of PIOs, watch commanders at the local law enforcement, the sheriff's office, and know who's who, what's what. So when the time comes, you want to get something out quickly, because the most important thing, Matthew, that we know is people want to know that you know.
Yeah.
And so, and you can even do that before you talk to law enforcement, is like, we're aware, we're looking into it, we're in contact, we're trying to work with, we are working with.
Yep.
So that is the first thing that will alleviate it, especially if it's a threat towards your school and it's getting out there. Let the people know, send the message that we're aware of this, we're looking into it. Then it's like, okay, I can calm down a little bit. They know about it, they're looking into it. If you're delaying in that and it's starting to get some steam and pick up, then that's where it's really starts to spiral.
Yeah.
For sure.
And it's tough too in some of these situations, like we saw in the listserv, that, it's not even credible threats against that particular district. They're not even schools in that district, and so it's circulating in the district and causing chaos and havoc, but they're unsubstantiated, even uncredible threats. And even at the point, just to your point, where you might not be able to come out and say, or your, police department's not ready to come out and say, this is an uncredible threat, acknowledging that you're aware of it, even if you probably believe it's uncredible, acknowledging it and getting out ahead of it is paramount. And then, of course, it's that follow-up. What are you doing? How are you handling it? On that note, I had one in a previous district where we got a threat one morning, a kid who was sending a fighter jet to blow up one of the schools, blow up his school. Likely, no. Probably pretty uncredible, right? But it's a threat, and you have to take the appropriate action and do your due diligence and do the research. And it turns out that kid just didn't want to take the math test that day.
Great.
But even at that point, you can't come out and say, oh, this isn't true. until your
Hmm.
investigative arm, whatever that is, if that's your local police department, the FBI, whoever that is, until they've done their due diligence and are ready to say it's not a credible threat.
Hmm. And that's the tough one because you got to take them all seriously.
Yeah.
And even even we know now that there's this hoax going around on social media. You
Yep.
still can't credit everything to, oh, this is the hoax. Like,
Yep.
you know, still got to take them seriously. So, communication in this is really the key. That is a overused phrase, but really, because there's not much else to do. Law enforcement is going to handle the investigation, but you need to just communicate with people, let them know what's going on and where you're at, and that's going to be essential to these types of situations.
Especially when you're looking at like attendance, because we know that students stay home or the parents keep students home if they feel that there's a threat or there's something going on. And, if you're ahead of the game, we know kids need to be in school. We know they do better when they're in school. It's a safe environment, as safe as we can provide. And their academic, social, emotional supports in there. And so, getting out ahead of it is going to make sure that you have your best opportunity of getting kids to show up for school, even if there is some uncertainty out there while that investigation is going on.
And we've done a podcast about this before, when to send a message and
Mm.
when not to. And I'll try and find the episode
Oh,
number.
such a
But
gray area.
yeah, it is gray area for sure. But here's data that you can collect to help you make an informed decision.
Mm.
Um, so say there's a threat out there, a social media threat, going to do something very bad to a school in your district or neighboring district. So I would put out something to my principals immediately and say, how many calls have you gotten on this? And so if you hear back, I've gotten 3 calls out of your 10 principals, then I'm not sending anything because you can handle those 3 calls in 30 seconds, and you don't need to get everyone else information that they're not inquiring about. It's not a big deal. It may be at another school. But if they're saying, I've gotten 30 calls this morning, I've gotten 10, then you're getting data. So talk to your schools. How many calls have you gotten? How many emails? Talk to the people at your district office who normally get the calls, to the front office that are checking the emails, and start gathering, how much, you can actually get data points from these very vague things about calls, emails, and then check your local Facebook community groups, your next doors, and all those annoying areas of on social media, and see how much talk there is in there. If it is posted, how many comments does it have? How many reactions? So you can actually start to make an informed decision with data. Because on the flip side, Matthew, you want to communicate. Over communicating is much better than under communicating. But if you're only, if there's one post with one comment and you've got one call at, a district of 20 schools, you're not going to send anything. Obviously, there's no credible threat either. So those are some data points that you can easily get within 5 minutes, reaching out to your principals and your staff, your office assistants and the like, and gauge, what are you hearing.
Yep. That's a really good point. Absolutely use data.
And then it kind of becomes like, who do you message to? Is that one school? Do you message the whole district? You always hear the tough issue of, I should know this. And, from a parent's perspective, sometimes they think they should know everything, but
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to, if your kid was in danger, you would know, but they're thinking because it was 3 schools over, 4 towns over, I should still know.
Yeah.
And those ones are a little bit more difficult to handle.
It is tricky. And where I went and landed with that, a lot of times would be I draft messaging if I had decided it was just going to be one single school, or maybe it was this one school and a neighboring school because they're really close. Because we have those schools out here in California where sometimes it's literally a block away. So if I'm sitting out messaging at one school, it might mean that the bleed over is going to be that I need to hit both. But if I was doing that one, I would still include all my principals. So before that messaging went out to families, I would hit up all my leadership and just say, look, we're sending this out at XYZ elementary school or middle school or high school. If you feel your community, if you're getting, calls, or you're feeling your community is getting stirred up about this, please feel free to use this messaging as well. But I wanted you to be aware that we're sending this out so that they're in the know, because if they start getting calls, or, they have a parent that has a friend at that school you're messaging about. Now they're calling the principal that we didn't send messaging out to, and they were unaware that you're sending messaging out. That puts them in a tough spot.
Yeah, that's a really good point of keeping your internal stakeholders, your principals, your admin, maybe your board
You're bored for sure.
in the loop
Yeah.
with, hey, we're hearing this, we're aware of it. If
Yep.
you're hearing about it, know that we know and let us know how much you're hearing about it. But that's a really good point.
Here to support. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, if for anybody that's new in the field, let's just talk about that order of notification. I always went superintendent, so that the superintendent, knew, and then board, and then principals, and then district staff, and then families. So that, we know that when we message parents, they're going to start calling the schools. They're going to call their teacher because, they get friendly with teachers. They get cell phone numbers, and they all need to be on the same page and have the same messaging. Board is priority. They're your elected officials. You got to keep happy. Then your executive management team on down to your leadership, like principals, assistant principals, and then staff, and then parents and guardians. I always did it in that order.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. And, your staff, even in positive messages,
Yes.
if you can give them a heads up, it helps just so, they are frontline communicators for us and they get a lot of, way more parents know them than they know us at the district office. So the more they are informed, the better,
Yep.
especially in crisis, to your point. The other thing I've been seeing a lot of is these matrix and these charts when a school threat should be communicated, what level is it, and 6 or 7 different levels. They look nice, they're color coded, but it's nice to have, but defining what a social media an angry student does and a joke is like, I don't know how helpful they are. They're kind of like the 80-page playbooks we all did in the pandemic. You did them because people felt good about you having them,
Yeah.
but when it really matters, those don't matter. Everything's different. So if you think you're going to look at a chart and be able to know when you're going to send a communication based on a threat that's different than the other ones before, nice to have, but
it is. I had it on my wall. And I can't remember a time where I referenced it during a crisis or emergency, but I will say that I did look at it, and I think it just got to the point where it was just in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
If this, then, and that, all that stuff. So it is good to have. I think maybe to your point earlier, it's just another data point. It's almost like consulting AI. Like, what do you think I should do about this? AI is going to be like, oh, here you go. But you're going to have to look at it and really, use your brain and your gut instinct. But maybe that's just another data point,
Yeah.
but definitely that's not something you're sitting there pulling off the wall and leaning on in the actual event of a crisis.
Right. It's not going to hurt, but don't think it's going to get you out of that situation, having your little chart there.
No way.
Yeah, but it's been a tough one because a lot of people are getting them, and it has a list of schools. They're either on Snapchat or these Google Sheets sometimes, and here's the list, here's the date. The good thing is we're starting to get messages or being asked of the bigger organizations to send this out so people know that there is a formalized hoax that is going through our state, going through our region, and I feel like it's getting nationwide too.
Yeah.
And it's weird. I don't know why people would do that. Obviously, the sick, but it's happening. It's a thing, and so hopefully, the more messaging we get from authorities, the better. But you still have to look into every threat. So
you do.
In the end, it's
you really do lean on your local team. Absolutely lean on your local team to do that investigation. One of my fears was that, and it's kind of coming back to me now, was something that, there are back channel communication platforms, right? And law enforcement tries their best, I think, to monitor a lot of those, but it is possible that one of these hoaxes travels around about, a school shooting on an X date, and that there are copycats out there that decide, hey, I've been thinking about doing that in real life. Like, I'm just going to do it on that date. And there could be, 2 or 3 that happen as a result of a student who's already in that space seeing it. And that just kind of pushes them over the edge. I mean, so to your point, it can be as incredible as you think it is, but until it's been actually investigated, there's nobody that can say it is or isn't. And if you haven't gone through that process, like they'll track these people down. Like they will track the student down. They will go to their house. They will find out if they have access to weapons. They will find out if their parents have weapons. They do a very, very thorough investigation. So it'll come back and they'll say, you know what? It's incredible because they don't even have access to the ability to do this. And the student acknowledged that they saw it and they thought it'd be funny to share because they're a middle school student and they didn't think it through, right? And that's usually what you get back on something like this. When it turns out it is one of your students that have shared one of these unsubstantiated pieces of nonsense,
Mm-hmm.
and just absolutely ruined an entire school day. So,
The other thing you can do too, especially when things are out of your control, whether it's something like this, is you can provide the resources where they can stay in touch and empower them. Like if your local police have a Nixle alert or some kind of community alert, let them know how to sign up for that. We've in California the past couple of weeks all these power outages because of the heat, the smoke. So here's how to sign up for alerts from Edison, your power company, your fire evacuation orders. So here, empower yourself, and it also gives them the subtle message like we don't do these things, but we're watching them, we're following them. You can do the same too and stay informed. The school's not responsible for power outages from the power company, and we don't put evacuations in neighborhoods for fires. But here's
yeah.
how to empower yourself. Here's more information, and then during crisis, some of these shootings, hoax or not, here's some resources if you're having trouble talking to your kid. Because even a threat, if a middle school kid, elementary kid comes across it on their social media that their school is going to be a target, that's
Mhm.
kind of very traumatic incident. So here's how, if you need to have a conversation with your child, here's how we can help you have that with those
Yep.
resources. So resources are always good to provide to the families too during these. And I find people really appreciate them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yep. And don't forget, like you just mentioned, Ryan, like plugging, how to access resources. Don't forget to plug your channels that you have as well. It's a good time to remind parents, maybe even after the event or whatever. But hey, this is why you need to follow our school social media feeds, our district feeds, our websites. That is going to be a main line of communication in those areas. So
Yeah, that's a great reminder. A sad but very true element for social media growth is a good crisis will
yeah,
will really get your engagement and your followers up. But
it
to your
sure
point
will.
too, because you're also not going to email blast every single thing,
Yeah.
but you will put more on social media because you can share the fire department a lot easier. You can
Mhm.
share the police department easier, and so you will put more on there. So it is advantageous to you as a parent or someone in the community to follow our social media. But to your point, which is a really good one, remind people in those main messages, stay in the know with us on social media too. And by the way, if our email system goes out because of some power outage or whatever, social media usually is up and running. So if you're not seeing an email, go to our social media and check for that information.
Absolutely right. Yep. And I have a 3 reasons. I call it 3 reasons email. I won't get into it right now, but it every year I would send it out to my families and it just lays out the 3 reasons, bullet pointed reasons, and then one sentence after each bullet point of why you want to follow school and district social media feeds. And reason number 3 is emergency communications. It'll likely be one of our main lines of communication is through social media feeds. And then I would tailor every single email to include the district accounts and the school specific accounts for that parent. So they could just simply click the link and like and follow and share really easily. So,
Very good advice. I've taken that template you provided a few years ago, and I always, at least once a year, try to send just an email blast to parents and say, "This is to that similar thing. We have social media. This is why to follow it, and it'll be good for you to stay in the loop." Well, we hope everyone hangs in there. This is
yeah,
very unfortunate. I don't think these things are going away, but hopefully we give you some insights on how to navigate these situations, which there's so many gray areas too, but collecting that data, going through your process, having resources, working with law enforcement, knowing
mm-hmm.
who law enforcement is, your contacts, that'll help you a lot. Expedite things the next time it happens. And we feel terrible that everyone's going through this, but we know so many are. So we thought we'd chat about it and try and help a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Last thing I'll say is if you are a PIO at a school district out there right now and you do not have the cell phone programmed in your phone of the local police department PIO, you're behind the ball already. So make that a priority, get that done. You know, we're also seeing from some of these districts that actually have gone through the school shooting events that with an active shooter, that it's also relevant to have the PIO at local hospitals as well. So if you have a local hospital and they have PIOs, you need to have those numbers programmed in your phone too. And be sure to put in there their role. So you don't have to, in the heat of a crisis, remember, oh my God, what was that lady's
Mhm.
name at the such and such hospital, and you can't find it in your phone. Put the name of the hospital in there as well, or hospital PIO or whatever. So it's easy for you to just search in the heat of the moment. Yeah, you need to have those numbers programmed. To Ryan's point, those relationships built before the problems happen.
Yeah, that's really good advice. The hospital one too is the one that, I didn't think of right
Mm-mm.
away. It
Me
slipped my
either.
mind, and it's a great suggestion for people to do. I remember the hospital calling me at
Yeah.
the onset of the
Mm.
pandemic for help, and so I got some context through there, but it was just like that connection you don't normally have.
No.
But to your point, during something like that, you'll be best friends for a few weeks for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, just think of it. You know, kids are getting shuttled out. They're injured, maybe
Hmm.
badly injured, getting schlepped off to the nearest hospital that can intake, and you are the connection to the parent. And that hospital, if that kid's incapacitated, and they don't have an easy way to identify, I mean, you being able to connect with that hospital and talk about, parent unification, talk about where kids are going, all of that kind of stuff. That's just going to be critical. That's what we're hearing from schools that have gone through it.
For sure. As we wrap up, quick thanks to our sponsors, Peach Jar, Nickel Strategies, S'more, and School Status. Without them, we cannot bring you this important information. I will point you to a few other previous podcasts we've done. We've had, speaking of school shootings, we had Rick Kaufman on the podcast 3 times talking about, school shooting, crisis
Mm-hmm.
communications. He was the PIO at Columbine during that terrible tragedy. He is a speaker. My superintendent was just in a session with him virtually very recently talking about this in wake of Georgia and what happened there. So we have a really good podcast and information with Rick on how to navigate some of these tougher situations. And then again, we have the podcast about when and when not to send a communication, which goes through those data points and dives a little bit deeper than we just did now. If you're looking for a little bit more PD and information on navigating these difficult situations. All right,
Absolutely.
Matthew, appreciate the knowledge as always.
Same, brother.
And it was good catching up, and we will talk to you very, very soon.
All right, my man. See you, everybody.
Be sure to follow the School PR Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and X, where you can find additional resources and highlights from the show. Please like, subscribe, and all the fun stuff. And most importantly, without our sponsors, this podcast doesn't exist. Please visit schoolstatus.com, peachjar.com, nickelstrategies.com, and s'more.com. Until next time, keep learning, inspiring, and making a difference. Thanks so much for your support of the School PR Podcast.